Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Gareth Greenaway joins me. We're going to talk about the OpenSUSE Summit, the summit about the OpenSUSE Linux distribution. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for FLOSS Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Gareth Greenaway. Episode 271, recorded October 30th, 2013. OpenSUSE Summit. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, MerlinStonehenge.com, bringing to you almost every week, pretty much every week actually, the movers, the shakers, the big projects in open source, the small projects you might not have heard of, and a lot of new and interesting projects as well. And where I'm generally joined by a co-host. This week is no exception, Gareth Greenaway. Welcome right back to the show.
Thanks, Randall. It's been too long.
I know, really, it's been like a week, right? We co-hosted last week, right?
I think exactly a week, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, welcome back to the show. And where are we speaking to you from? Probably the same normal place there, Thousand Oaks, right?
Yep, exact same place. My desk in my office in Thousand Oaks.
Well, some of you who have been longtime longtime watchers of the show might recognize this a closet door behind me. I'm back in Portland for the week. I am between gigs, on the beach, as they say in consultant terms, and so I'll be coming to you a little more often from here until I get my next gig. I do have a couple of leads, so I'm hoping at least one of them pans out. But again, I'm looking for work. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. The show's not about me or about Gareth. It's about our guests, and this week is no exception to that. We have OpenSUSE back again. I'm probably mispronouncing that. OpenSUSE, something like that. We've had them on the show actually twice before. Where's my notes here? On episode 48, which was way back in November of 2008, we brought Zonker on to talk about OpenSUSE. And then on show 98 in December 2009, we talked about the new release 11.2. I'm sure we've had a lot more releases since then. We'll have to have our guests actually talk about what's happened since those two shows came about. But this is specifically a show, not just in general about OpenSUSE, but also the OpenSUSE Summit, which is coming up very shortly, I think only in about 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll have them describe that as well. Gareth, what do you know about OpenSUSE?
I played around with it a little bit. I know it's...
What was that?
That wasn't what I was going to say, but that does not reflect badly on OpenSUSE, I hope, though. Yeah, so I played with it a bit. I know it's a solid distribution, primarily geared, I believe, towards like kind of enterprise corporate environments, at least early on. I know they have a really strong community. And I'm sure our guests can tell us a lot more about it than I possibly could.
That's good. Well, then let's go ahead, and without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest, Robert Schweikert. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Randall. Thanks for having us today.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I am located in Massachusetts, and it is not very sunny today. And parts of the state are supposed to get snow, I guess. So.
And so let's also go ahead and bring on our other guest, Jos Portvliet, I believe. Welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to meet you guys.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Berlin, Germany, although I'm Dutch, moved here a while ago. And I have my dog sitting behind me, as you can see when I move a little bit.
Oh, cool. So the dog's also on the show. Nice. That's very cool. So
Exactly.
let's start with Robert. Can you give us a bit of overview of the OpenSUSE project, how it got started, and most importantly, where it's come since our 2009 show, which is actually 5 years ago? Yeah, so it must be quite a lot of progress since then.
Yeah, there have been a lot of progress. The project has been growing steadily and is still growing steadily. We're getting more and more contributors, which is great. Recently at the OpenSUSE conference, some statistics were presented that show the growth of contributor base, and also shows that our users are still steadily growing. And in the end, we actually have more users than Fedora, which was very nice to see. And yeah, so we always, get new projects. Our main tool for creating the distribution is the Open Build Service. And within the Open Build Service, people can create their own projects, build their packages, and then eventually can migrate them from there into Factory, which is the precursor to the next release. And we're actually getting pretty close to having a new release. OpenSUSE 13.1 is coming out right after the OpenSUSE Summit in a few weeks. Yeah, so our main tool to create the OpenSUSE distribution is the Open Build Service. And people can just create accounts and then start packaging their software, and not just for OpenSUSE, but also for other distributions. And then from there, generally the packages migrate to a development project, and then from the development project into Factory. And Factory is the precursor to the next distribution release. And we have OpenSUSE 13.1 right around the corner, just a couple of days after the OpenSUSE Summit in mid-November.
I definitely want to talk a lot more about this summit, but how did you get involved with OpenSUSE, and what's your capacity with regard to the project?
Within the project, I'm a technical contributor. I maintain some packages that are part of the distribution, and I maintain packages that are not part of the distribution but are available for download within the OpenSUSE build service. And I'm also a member of the OpenSUSE board. And we're also having board elections coming around here at the end of the year, where the members of the OpenSUSE project vote basically who is on the board.
Cool. And there's a lot of Linux distributions out there, and I'm not much of a Linux user, so I don't know how to distinguish them. What would be some of the characteristics that would distinguish this distribution from, say, Fedora or any of the other, or Ubuntu or any of the other popular ones?
So one of our key elements are really, some of the tools that we have, like the Open Build Service that I already mentioned. It is so currently we have about 6,000 packages, I believe, part of the distribution proper, but there are maybe twice as many packages available through the build service. So not everything that is built in the build service is part of the distribution, but the build service makes it really easy to get those additional packages. And people are always, like I do with, for example, I package OpenNebula, which is a cloud framework that is not part of the distribution, but is available for pretty much any version of OpenSUSE. And you can just get the packages if you're after that. And so that's one of the big differentiators between OpenSUSE and other distributions. We also have a setup tool, which is called Yoast, which is quite popular. And in the 13.1 release, there was a big change in the Yoast framework, which has now been rewritten in Ruby. Previously, it had its own language and made it difficult for people to contribute and to maintain. That has all been changed. It's now switched to Ruby, so contributors have a much easier time to jump in and help develop the Yoast infrastructure.
Okay, cool. Yoast, how did you get involved with OpenSUSE, and what's your current role?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So how did you get involved with OpenSUSE, and what's your current role?
Okay, well, I got involved about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, when I got hired as community manager, and that's what I still am. So that's a lot about, handling communication within and around the project. I do a lot of the marketing for the project. I maintain a news site, things like that. And the communication from the OpenSUSE team at SUSE, so the people at SUSE who are dedicated to maintaining OpenSUSE infrastructure and OpenSUSE factory maintenance, for example. I'm part of that team. I take care of most of the communication that we do in terms of formal communication, our team blog and things like that.
So we mentioned already a couple of times with this upcoming summit. That's actually the reason you guys contacted us to have this show happen. I understand it's only like a few weeks away. Is this the first event like this, or is this one of an ongoing series?
Well, I haven't been to the summit myself, but it's the second time it is. Robert is doing most of the organization on it. But yeah, it's basically was envisioned as the US, or at least American equivalent of the OpenSUSE conference, which took place in Europe. And last year it tagged on to SUSECon, which was also the first time SUSE did an event as an independent organization in the Americas. And this year again, the summit basically follows SUSECon the days after the event finishes. Actually, it goes on right away. SUSECon, I believe, ends on a Friday in the afternoon, and the OpenSUSE Summit takes it over right there and continues opening in the afternoon of Friday.
So what kind of activities, what can people expect to see if they're attending the OpenSUSE Summit?
It's very much a traditional free software conference, I suppose. I mean, there are talks, a variety of workshops. It ranges from technical sessions. I mean, there are people there who know a lot about the internals. I mean, as a distribution, you touch everything. I mean, that's the typical thing that, you have people working on the kernel, you have people working on packaging, you have people doing artwork, you have people doing marketing. So we try to make sure that all these subjects are touched upon at the summit. And there are people talking about each of those. I mean, I myself talk about marketing and, presenting a project at a conference. But there are also talks about pretty low-level Linux technologies and, everything in between, basically.
And the speakers, are they primarily OpenSUSE community members, or do you have kind of people from outside that may not necessarily be directly involved with the community or working for SUSE, but just happen to use it either in their jobs or as hobbies?
Yeah, so we have
Robert knows more about the exact schedule, I think.
So we have a mixture of speakers. We have a number of speakers from the OpenSUSE community. Some of them also happen to be SUSE employees. But we also have speakers that are, not generally involved with the OpenSUSE community. We have somebody speaking about Zen, who's from Citrix. We have a presenter from Dell. And Russ, the speaker from Citrix, actually is talking about Zen, and he's also talking about community building, which is great. We have Michael Alves as the keynote speaker on Saturday. Michael is, I think, pretty well known in the open source community. He also spoke earlier this year at the Southeast Linux Fest and at the Puppet Labs conference. And so we're very happy to have him. He will speak to us about, how important communication is within, especially open source projects. And so we're all looking forward to that. We have some hands-on workshops. We're taking advantage of SUSECon being directly ahead of us, so we get laptops, so people don't have to use their own laptops for the workshops. We have one full day of workshops in addition to 2 talks that run in parallel. So the program is pretty full, and I think it's very interesting.
Can you talk a bit about the workshops? Like, what kind of topics will be covered in those workshops?
Yeah, so one workshop is focused on systemd, and of course systemd has gotten a lot of, or has started a lot of flame wars between those that for some reason are in love with System 5 in its system, and other people that think it is time for System 5 to go away and be replaced. So we have a workshop that is focused on systemd, how to set up services within the new environment using systemd. So that will be led by Frederic Crosar, who actually implemented systemd in the OpenSUSE distribution. For the first time, we started having systemd, I think, in OpenSUSE 12.2. And So the person who actually did all the work is leading the workshop, so that's great. And then the second workshop is going to be about image building with an image building tool that's called Kiwi. That workshop, and now my picture is frozen, so I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you? Yeah, okay, great. So the second workshop is about an image building tool called Kiwi, and I am contributor to that project, and I am running that workshop. And with Kiwi, you can basically build OS images or appliances, and Kiwi is also the backend to SUSE Studio.
So, Robert, how is the planning for the summit going?
It's going pretty well. We've got most everything under control. We're still working on the evening events. We will have a pizza party on Friday night. We will have a Mexican-themed party on Saturday. Everything else is pretty much settled. As far as the surroundings of the event is concerned, it will, take place at the Coronado Springs Resort in Orlando, basically at the front door of Disney World. So it's worth a trip, not just for the OpenSUSE Summit, but also, if anybody is interested in going to Disney World, you can make a vacation of it. And you get a great weekend of some great technical talks and talks about community. So the planning is mostly wrapped up. The schedule is posted on the Summit website, which you can see at the bottom, summit.opensuse.org. And we have some fun and games planned as well. So we're going to have a Geeko Hunt game where the participants get to find little geekos, which is our mascot, that will be placed throughout the venue. And at the end on Sunday, at the closing event, somebody will win a backpack. So we have some fun things planned, and we're hoping for lots of people to join us at the event. And the registration is open. Again, you can get to the registration system from the summit.opensuse.org webpage. And yeah, we're looking forward to a great event like we had last year.
That's awesome. How many people are involved in the planning? How many people help you out with planning the event?
So the core team is about 4 or 5 people. We have one person that is local in Florida, which is a great help. Stephen Doris, he has done all the distribution of the local advertising material and stuff like that. So that was great. We have one person contacting universities and Lux and so on to get the word out about, the summit. And yeah, so the core team is about 4 or 5 people, and things are coming together pretty nicely.
So, Robert, how do you guys divide up the roles within the conference, kind of the core team? Like, who does what, or do you kind of like spread the load across the whole team?
Yeah, so I've been trying to pull the strings and basically, spread work around as people have time and volunteer to take on whatever task needs to be doing at the time. We have weekly meetings on IRC where we basically go through our action items, look at the stuff that needs to be done. And then hopefully somebody stands up and says, okay, I'll do that. And somebody else does something else. And whatever's left, that is then for me to do. But we're pretty much coming to an end with the organization. Other than food and some other things, most of the stuff is taken care of. And so it's been stressful, but also rewarding. And it'll be great to see people at the summit. And then I think that we'll see. That's always a great feeling.
So Jas, I'm sort of curious about the user community of OpenSUSE. Are they mostly high-end tinkerers or just end users or some broad mix of that?
Well, if you compare OpenSUSE to other distributions, I think you asked that question earlier. One of the things that sets us apart is indeed the tools we have, but another thing is that OpenSUSE has more of a focus on stability than at least, for example, Fedora and perhaps Ubuntu. We have slightly longer release cycle, 8 months. So that gives us a little more time to, make sure that stuff doesn't break all the time. We also are a little more conservative. Don't always ship the super latest, but we might hold back on something to make it a little more, or to give it a little more time to stabilize. And that results in, more of a workhorse, which gives us a lot of users who simply have work to do. And that really is a bit of that is obviously also a focus of a lot of our contributors as well, to try and make sure that OpenSUSE can be used for, people using it in their office, at home, to get stuff done. So in terms of users, I think that's the type of users you see a lot for OpenSUSE.
Would you say it's used more for desktop usage or server usage, or is it equally at home in both?
I think it's definitely equally at home in both. I mean, we have all the desktops. GNOME, KDE, XFCE, LXDE, and Enlightenment are our official desktops. So obviously a lot of desktop users use that, but the techies also like their obscure window managers, and there's a lot of server technologies. I mean, OpenSUSE 13.1, which is coming on November 19, will bring, for example, the latest Havana release of OpenStack. So, new Apache, new MySQL, etc. So there's a lot of server technology there as well.
Very cool.
And
very
people
cool.
use that, absolutely. There are a lot of servers out there running OpenSUSE.
Okay. Robert, I have a question for you. I speak at a lot of conferences, and one of the things I always have to figure out before I pitch a possible talk to a conference is sort of what the user level is, the audience level is. Of the people coming to the summit, would you say there are more entry-level people, programmer types, system administrator types, business people? What level do you think the summit is best represented by?
Well, as I said, I wasn't there last year, but from what I heard from other people, you're mostly talking about end users and administrators. Some of the people who come to SUSECon stay a little bit longer, and quite a few of them are more technical people, engineers. But I think the majority of people who come to OpenSUSE are either contributors, a lot of them doing marketing or packaging, which is hard work in itself, obviously, but it's not, hardcore kernel programmers or people like that. So you're mostly talking about end users and, less technical contributors.
So, Jas, we're almost out of time. Is there anything we didn't ask that you want to make sure our audience is aware of about the summit or about OpenSUSE in general?
I think a couple of things I want to point out before we close up. First of all, the release that's coming is coming on November 19, and we're publishing a lot of news about that on news.opensuse.org. We just finished a sneak peek of what's coming in GNOME, and that's a pretty good overview, even if you don't use OpenSUSE, about GNOME and what's in the latest release. And next week we have the same for KDE, which I wrote myself, and that'll have some tips and things that you would find interesting, I think, as KDE user, again, even if you don't use OpenSUSE. The summit takes place essentially the weekend before the OpenSUSE release. So that's 15, 16, 17, I believe, in Florida. So if anyone's interested in an open source conference that has a variety of subjects, obviously, and is happening in a sunny place, then think about the summit. It's a very interesting schedule, which again also you can find on summit.opensuse.org.
Robert, we're almost out of time, so is there anything that we haven't asked you that you want to make sure that our audience is aware of?
Check out the OpenSUSE project. We're a fun group. We're a very welcoming community.
Did Randall freeze?
Check out the OpenSUSE Summit site at summit.opensuse.org. And if you have, time, stop by the summit and hang out with us. It'll be fun. We'll have a couple of parties. We have great talks. Have, a game or two. And and then the release is coming in on November 19th, OpenSUSE 13.1. We expect a great release. I've been already running RC1 and RC2 on some of my laptops here, and it's really stable and it's great. So hopefully we'll get to see you at the summit.
Absolutely sounds like fun. I have to ask my two official questions. What's your favorite scripting language?
Python.
Figures. Okay, how about your favorite text editor?
Emacs.
Yay! Well, it's a variant, but it works. Sure, that's good. It's got a lot of the right letters in it. Really, Emacs though? I didn't know anybody actually still used that.
Yeah, well, what can I say? Old
Very
habits
good. Very
are hard
good.
to change.
Very good. Well, I have to say this is, even though I'm saying we're almost out of time, this show is probably going to be the shortest show we've ever done, because we had a lot of technical problems during the show, and I appreciate both of you guys sort of sitting through the technical issues and while we were trying to get it all fixed up. And thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having us. It was very nice and much appreciated. Thank you.
Very good. And that was Robert Schweikert and Jos Portvliet, like that, something like that, talking to us about OpenSUSE. What do you think, Gareth?
It sounds like it's very active, and their summit sounds like it'll be a good time for all the people attending.
Very good. Very good. Well, I don't have much to add to that because it sounds like it's a great conference. Unfortunately, it's like, since we only found out about it 3 weeks ahead of when it happened, this is obviously something I'm not going to be able to attend because it's way too late in my schedule. I usually plan my years, almost a year in advance in terms of what conferences and stuff I'm going to, because there's just so much coordination required, especially being a speaker too. So it's a little complex for me. But yeah, if you're into OpenSUSE, this sounds like a good place to either do this year if you've got a flexible schedule, or look for it next year. Sounds like a lot of fun. So speaking of upcoming guests, which is my awkward transition for the day, we only have a few still scheduled. I have been really lax in sending out my email because I've just been, with the wrap up of the previous client and looking for new work, I've kind of had a lot of my time taken up. But we've got, next week, we've got G Potter, a podcast manager. Some of you, in fact, are probably even listening to this on G Potter. We have the OpenStack Community Edition, RDO is what they're calling that, from Red Hat. We also have the fork of ZeroMQ called Crossroads. So I'm looking forward to all those shows. I'm actually not hosting any of those because starting next week, I will be actually on a cruise ship. I've actually been on 3 different cruises between now and the end of the year, one around South America, one over down the Rhone River, and one on, where am I going? Out of New York going towards the Eastern Caribbean. So my co-hosts have arranged themselves so that we can still do shows every week, provided I could fill in with some guests. So it'll be kind of fun. If you want to see how that process is going, you can go to twit.tv/floss, which is our homepage. And from there, you'll see a spreadsheet linked from there. You can follow us on Floss Weekly on Google+, and also at Floss Weekly on Twitter. We do have a live chat. We didn't take any questions from it this time, I don't think, but when we tape the show, which is usually 8:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, we do actually watch the chat room for other questions. You can follow me as Merlin on Twitter, but more likely you'll see me on Google+, Randall L. Schwartz. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I am still looking for work. I have a couple of possible leads, but I can always use a few more leads. I'm a Perl programmer by training, but I also do DevOps and technical writing and sysadmin and that sort of stuff. So looking for something in that arrangement. And Gareth, quickly, what do you have to say? I think I know what it's going to be.
Yeah, so I'll plug my usual plug. So Scale, SoCal Linux Expo is coming up February 21st through the 23rd. The call for papers is still open until December 15th. Registration is open as well for anyone that's interested in attending. They can use the special promo code FLOSS for a 50% discount. So
Awesome.
Come on out. It's a great show. We'd love to see you there.
Great. And so without further ado, we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.